Mark Zuckerberg has done more harm to the global youth population than anyone in the history of mankind. Mark built Facebook to connect people, but in the most ironic fashion possible, it has begun to do the very opposite. Facebook rips us apart and profits off our deepest division, vanity, and outrage. I've worked in technology for the better part of the last 9 years, working for the largest and oldest technology corporations to ever exist, IBM, Amazon Music, and AWS, in addition to spending 4 years earning an undergraduate degree in computer science. Needless to say, I know a thing or two about technology. Mark Zuckerberg created a platform that weaponizes the most advanced open source software, artificial intelligence, and big data to exploit us and prey on our worst instincts as a species.
I'm just going to say, I think Mark Zuckerberg has done more damage to young people in our nation while making more money than any person in history.
Zuckerberg is Facebook. Every scandal, every unethical decision, every harmful consequence, he's at the center of it. He didn't just build Facebook. He built a global machine of manipulation, surveillance, and addiction that has shaped the world in ways we are only beginning to understand.
Facebook facing a lawsuit after allowing data mining firms access to millions of users' information.
And through it all, he's made an obscene amount of money while evading accountability at every single turn.
There is a possibility that the American public had been experimented on.
At what point does a person stop being just a tech visionary and start becoming a severe threat to society?
Do you feel like it's a backlash, or do you feel like you're violating people's privacy? Do you feel like you're adequately portrayed? Because I want to wonder about the person who actually created this thing.
Hi there, my name is Dylan. I'm a full-time software engineer, part-time content creator. By the way, it was my goal this year to get to 10,000 subscribers, and we are currently closing in on that mark right now. So please consider helping me and my team out a ton by hitting that subscribe button down below. Back to the video. Look, Mark has always been sort of an oddball, and I don't really understand why or how he acts in the strange ways that he does, but on whole, he has done an unfathomable amount of damage to society. Let's talk about Mark's rise to prominence and the real impacts his actions have caused. And as always, to understand how we got here, we must first take a look at the rise of the world's most sociopathic CEO.
I remember that night I launched Facebook from that little dorm in Kirkland House. I went to Noakes with my friend KX, and I remember telling him clearly that I was excited to help connect the Harvard community, but one day someone would connect the whole world. The thing is, it never even occurred to me that that someone might be us. We were just college kids. We didn't know anything about that.
Mark Zuckerberg didn't come up with Facebook, he stole it. Let me explain. Facebook began at Harvard University in 2003 as FaceMash, an online service for students to judge the attractiveness of female Harvard students. Because the primary developer, Zuckerberg, violated university policy in acquiring photographs of students from sorority house websites for the service, it was shut down after 2 days. Zuckerberg has stated on multiple instances that he started Facebook because he wanted to, quote, find a girlfriend. That's a pretty stark contrast from the I just wanted to connect people messaging he goes with today. Eventually, the social network, the Facebook, launched in February 2004. Harvard students who signed up for the service could post photographs of themselves and personal information about their lives, such as their class schedule and the clubs they belonged to. Its popularity increased, and soon students from other prestigious schools, such as Yale and Stanford universities, were allowed to join. By June 2004, more than 250,000 students from 34 schools had signed up, and that same year, major corporations such as the credit card company MasterCard started paying for exposure on the site. Social media was originally aimed at connecting people, but in recent years it has begun to do the very opposite of what it was intended, destroying young people's sense of purpose, self, and belonging in the real world. Don't worry, we will get to how big of a detriment Facebook has been to society in a minute, but first, thievery. A federal judge will consider next week whether to throw out a lawsuit that accuses Facebook.com founder Mark Zuckerberg of stealing the idea for the popular social networking site from 3 of his former Harvard classmates. The lawsuit, originally filed in 2004, claims that Zuckerberg stole the idea, the source code, and the business plan for Facebook in 2003 while working as a programmer for 3 former Harvard students who were developing their own social networking site, now called ConnectU.com. Mark had to settle this in court, indicating to me that he did something pretty wrong. Look, I'm also not here here to litigate this topic. There's plenty of evidence online about Mark stealing Facebook.
Because it wasn't just the Winklevosses and the company ConnectU suing Mark, it was Facebook suing back ConnectU, and then a company called i2Hub over their attempt to copy Facebook with another platform called Social Butterfly. And then they settled this lawsuit. Facebook agreed to pay ConnectU with a combination of cash and shares, but then more lawsuits happened. ConnectU sued just weeks after the settlement, again, questioning the value of the shares that they have received as part of the settlement. They sued their law firm for malpractice, who actually sued them back. I mean,
this also doesn't surprise me at all. Silicon Valley is plain and simple just ruthless. This is a near copy-paste of what Elon did with Tesla, but with just a slightly different flavor of betrayal. Look, a lot of people have similar ideas at the same time, right? Surely Mark Zuckerberg's genius innovation was done solely of his own making.
Hey.
At this point, I can't believe how many times we fall for the self-made billionaire story. Also, brief tangent on billionaires. They really shouldn't exist as a whole. You know, 1, 2, 3 billion, maybe I could get behind that, but hundreds of billions of dollars is just a level of wealth hoarding that I don't know if anybody can really get behind. Mark Zuckerberg's $226 billion is a failure of us all. By 2005, Zuckerberg had already extracted venture capital, securing $12.7 million from Accel Partners. Facebook quickly grew, expanding beyond Ivy League schools, and by 2006, it opened to the general public. That same year, Facebook introduced the News Feed, a feature that sparked immediate backlash for its invasiveness. Zuckerberg dismissed privacy concerns at the time, an attitude that would set the theme and entirely foreshadow its playbook going forward. By 2012, Facebook went public with one of the largest IPOs in history, valuing the company at over $100 billion. Over the years, it expanded by acquiring companies like Instagram in 2012, WhatsApp in 2014, and Oculus VR that same year. So Facebook IPOs, everyone gets rich and happily ever after, right? Right? Look, I don't think Zuck had poor intentions from the get-go, but as happens with most tech CEOs, money has completely polluted his sense of identity.
You seem like a natural.
Whoa. All right, that's a little too realistic.
Despite his intentions, Mark Zuckerberg ended up creating one of the most destructive products to ever exist for the youth population and the global population as a whole. Researchers delved into whether the platform's introduction across college campuses in the mid-2000s increased symptoms associated with depression and anxiety. The answer was a clear yes. We find that the rollout of Facebook at college had a negative impact on student mental health. It also increased the likelihood with which students reported experiencing impairments to academic performance due to poor mental health. Additional evidence on mechanisms suggests that the results are due to Facebook fostering unfavorable social comparisons.
We're economically attacking the young, but I know, let's attack their emotional and mental well-being. Let's take advantage of the fact of the flaws in our species with medieval institutions, Paleolithic instincts, and godlike technology. I'm just going to say, I think Mark Zuckerberg has done more damage to young people in our nation while making more money than any person in history.
Internal research from Facebook itself supports this. A 2021 leak revealed that Instagram was, quote, toxic for teen girls, making body image issues worse for 1 in 3 users. Mark Zuckerberg knew this and continued to aggressively market to young users anyways. Are we really surprised? Does this not happen with every single product and company unless we regulate them? Dryden Chemical and DuPont would still be dumping mercury into the river if it wasn't for legislation against it.
Well, good thing it's Teflon.
I've said this before, but remember when smoking was good for you? My doctor recommends 1 pack of Camel cigarettes a day. What a joke. Personally, I deleted my Facebook account long ago. I only really use it now for a select few services that require you to have a personal account to operate them, like Facebook ads, certain Facebook groups, and Facebook Marketplace is like, okay. My experience of social comparison happens mostly now on Instagram, a social platform that is almost always designed to promote the most superficial and vain parts of our lives. Instagram always makes me feel worse after using it. I miss the days where Instagram was basically just you and your friends hanging out online. Now I rarely see posts from my friends. It's all just algorithmic garbage designed to keep me engaged as long as possible. Check this out. This is literally my Instagram feed. Someone I hardly know, for you, ad. Someone I hardly know, for you, ad. Someone I hardly know. For you, someone I hardly know. Ad. Different, but not really. The day Facebook died for me was the day they forced the switch to the timeline nonsense, where an algorithm would decide what you wanted to see next, rather than it being sorted simply by chronological order of most recent to least recent posts of friends of mine. That's the day it crossed the threshold from tool to connect with loved ones to marketing machine. I swear, hardly anyone sees my pictures anymore. It seems to all be stories and reels, which is fine, but I love photography, and it makes the whole process of shooting, editing, and uploading feel a bit pointless when you don't really get any engagement. I've experienced this exact problem on Instagram. All the traction and attention go to the top 10% of creators who know how to game the algorithm, or the other bulk of people who pay a bunch of money to put stuff into my suggested For You page. Facebook is dying, literally. If you think about it, there will eventually be a point in which Facebook will have more dead users than active ones. Not even accounting for all the burner, troll, and alt accounts out there, it's literally becoming a graveyard. I think this is just some sort of social media life cycle, and that the next big thing will eventually come along. But as of right now, the platform is basically just a place to share dead memes and where your mom and aunts compare their scores on Candy Crush. The problem with these platforms is that we optimize for engagement at all costs. Cost to society not included, and the impact to your users isn't considered. A significant issue with Facebook is its role in misinformation and fake news propagation. The platform's algorithm, designed to maximize engagement, often prioritizes sensational and divisive content regardless of its veracity. Sensationalists and untrue stories receive amplified visibility due to engagement-driven algorithms. Users are often exposed to information that reinforces their beliefs, limiting exposure to diverse perspectives. Misinformation on Facebook has been used to manipulate public opinion, particularly during elections. See the Cambridge Analytica section coming up next. Lawsuits filed by multiple U.S. states allege that Facebook's design encourages addictive use patterns, exacerbating mental health issues among teens. What makes social media so addictive, you might ask? Variably rewarding users with stimuli, likes, notifications, comments, etc. keeps them engaged with content. When a user's photo receives a like, the same dopamine pathways involved in motivation, reward, and addiction are activated. What keeps us hooked on social media isn't the pleasure rush of the like, says Johansson. It's the intermittent absence of the like that keeps us engaged. Exactly. I've been off social media since a year now. Best decision. Less anxiety, better mood. Initially, I had, quote, withdrawals, used to crave scrolling while waiting at a line or simply in a lift with people. Replace that with reading on my phone. Yes, it's a little difficult at first, but you grow out of seeking constant dopamine. Suddenly, I find myself having time for hobbies. Sleep is better too. Replace the screen with a book before bed. Good for you, man. Good for you. Intermittent reward is the most addictive reward schedule and also the most difficult to unlearn. Facebook stole the playbooks of casinos, and of course the gambling companies are using this. They literally are the gambling industry. One result of trapping users into endless scrolling loops is that it can lead to social comparison. When presented with curated feeds of other people, we are vulnerable to, quote, frequent and extreme upward social comparison, which can lead to a number of negative side effects such as erosion of self-esteem, depressed mood, and decreased life satisfaction. Some people try to cope with an eroded self-esteem by attacking other people's sense of self, which can lead to cyberbullying. Of course it does. I love Instagram, but I always have to remind myself that it's not reality. People post pictures to make their lives and relationships seem absolutely perfect when that's not the case. It's easy to get jealous of people living the, quote, perfect life, but it's important to remember that no one is going to share the not so good things in life. That was from 8 years ago. Do you know how much social media has changed since then? I can't imagine the impact this is having on the newer generation. I remember when I was in middle school, and this was when your Instagram feed was still in RSS, in reverse chronological order, and you could just see things from friends. That had a huge impact on my mental health then, let alone the advent of the algorithm. Let's see what people are saying since a couple of years ago. I don't use Instagram because it feels like a very desperate process. It's not about sharing something you captured. It's about crafting an image to make your experience seem more beautiful and meaningful. With all of the people whose lives and sometimes also livelihoods revolve around Instagram, you can end up with a feed full of dazzling photos that make you feel bad, even as you know exactly how processed they are and how little they actually represent real experiences. Okay, but what about today? I'm sure it's better today. After years of Instagram scrolling addiction, I finally deleted the Instagram app off my phone, and wow, it's been such an improvement in my life. Adorable Growth said, same. I couldn't stand the fakeness of it anymore. Absolutely made me feel like shit about myself for no reason, and everything is so staged nowadays. I sometimes dip back in for work, check out what's on my feed, roll my eyes, and leave again. I say, good for you. Additional case studies around the world have shown that Facebook's products have contributed to real-world harm. Perhaps the gravest example is Myanmar, where Facebook became a key vector for the extremist propaganda in the lead-up to the Rohingya genocide in 2017. Hateful and false posts calling for violence against the Muslim minority spread unchecked on Facebook. An investigation by Amnesty International found that Facebook's algorithms actively amplified anti-Rohingya hate speech, and the company's, quote, reckless pursuit of profit, quote, substantially contributed to the atrocities committed by the Myanmar military. Facebook's own officials knew or should have known what was happening, yet did far too little as engagement in Myanmar was growing, which, of course, increases their ad revenue. These are ad platforms. During the massacre and mass expulsions, Facebook was profiting from the echo chamber of hatred that was propagated online. Only after a global outcry did Zuckerberg admit Facebook's failures in Myanmar, and even then the response was largely reactive, hiring more Burmese-speaking moderators, for example, coming after untold lives were lost. Each time, Facebook's growth in these markets outpaced its willingness to police itself, leading to societal destabilization. Furthermore, Facebook's economic exploitation extends even to its own workers and contractors.
Third-party companies are hired by giants like Facebook to remove objectionable content. So-called content moderators can view up to 25,000 questionable images in a day.
The company outsources much of its content moderation to low-paid workers in developing countries who are tasked with viewing graphic violence, hate, and abuse for hours on end. In 2022, a group of Facebook moderators in Kenya sued Facebook over traumatic working conditions and unfair dismissal, alleging that they were subjected to psychological harm with inadequate support, a direct consequence of Facebook's cost-cutting and outsourcing practices. Facebook fought to deflect responsibility in that case, highlighting again how the company often treats the people who bear the brunt of its toxic content cleanup as disposable. I don't have time to dive into this, but the outcomes for content moderators on social platforms are absolutely dreadful. While I don't exactly condone the outline of content moderation entirely, I do think that people not having to do this job anymore is a good thing. More on content moderation later. We will get to it, don't you worry. All of these cases, from genocidal violence to election interference to mental health crises to the exploitation of workers, trace back to choices made at the top. Over and over, Mark Zuckerberg has opted for strategies that maximize user engagement, data collection, and profit, even when those things inflict profound harm upon society. At this point, you might be wondering, Dylan, you're only talking about Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, right? These are just companies. What does this have to do with Mark Zuckerberg? Yeah, they are just companies, but the identity of Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, WhatsApp, Meta, whatever, are all intertwined together. He is at the helm. Mark Zuckerberg has been at Facebook since the very inception of the company. He is Facebook, he is Instagram. Instagram and Facebook are reflections of him. The captain of the ship is responsible for the ship, the crew, and all of its passengers. My reason for hating Zuckerberg is because he pretty obviously sacrificed the well-being of humanity for Facebook's growth. They knew certain optimizations to the platform were bad for well-being, but proceeded with those things to grow the platform. Most obvious example is the mental health of young girls due to Instagram use.
We're not going to share people's information except for with the people that they've asked for it to be shared. And everyone gets privacy settings. It has always been one of the big differentiators for Facebook. A really different service for people is you can say, I want this photo album to go to these people, or I want this note to go to these people. And the privacy controls on Facebook are really unparalleled by anything else.
At the same time of all of these problems, Mark Zuckerberg has overseen some of the most egregious privacy violations in human history, often treating fines and lawsuits as minor speed bumps. In 2013, a bug exposed 6 million users' private contact info. In 2014, Facebook ran a psychological experiment on its users, without consent, manipulating their news feed to see if they could alter their emotional state. This is diabolical. It is absurd that it is 2025 in the United States and we still have zero privacy legislation to protect users. Big tech loves to claim that it's overregulated, but this might be one of the most underregulated industries to ever have walked the earth. Cue the cringiest interview I have ever seen with Mark Zuckerberg.
And
I thought that was a fascinating
It's
answer.
okay. You want to take off the hoodie?
You know, I never take off the hoodie.
I know you don't. What's with that? There's a group of women in the audience that wish you would.
No.
Girls?
Whoa.
All right.
Sorry. Yeah, that's okay.
Can you explain what this instant personalization thing was that you did and why you did it and what's the value of it to your users?
Maybe I should take off the hoodie.
Take off the hoodie.
Go ahead.
You want
What
to?
the hell?
Are you hot? Go ahead. Here. Let me get someone. You all right?
Yeah.
This is a great moment in internet history.
What?
As he's so nervous, he started sweating immediately when they started talking about privacy. This man is hiding a lot of things. The original video for this years ago had 13 million views before being deleted. It was titled, Mark Zuckerberg Sweats When Asked About Privacy. Who's surprised?
When a Facebook user bought his wife a diamond ring online, the surprise was ruined because Beacon notified all his friends and his wife about it on Facebook. With stories like that, criticism of Beacon began to build.
There was once a time when companies could track purchases by Facebook users and then notify their Facebook friends of what had been bought, many times without their user consent. In an apology on December 6, 2007, Zuckerberg explained his thought process behind the program called Beacon and announced that users would be given the option to opt out of it. This is the problem. Most of these programs and features are opt out, meaning they are on by default and effectively never get turned off because users have to navigate 8 sub-menus down to find the option that they are looking for. We were excited about Beacon because we believe a lot of information people want to share isn't on Facebook, and if we found the right balance, Beacon would give people an easy and controlled way to share more of that information with their friends, he said. Seems like a pretty blatant privacy violation to me.
You know, it might take some work for us to get this exactly right. This is something that we think is going to be a really good thing.
A basic solution is to make all of these things opt-in, data harvesting, targeted advertising, and the like. This way, users could consciously decide what they are signing up for. In June 2013, Facebook bug exposes the email addresses and phone numbers of 6 million Facebook users to anyone who had some connection to the person or knew at least one piece of their contact information. Thanks a lot, Mark. Facebook's mood manipulation experiment in 2014 included more than 500,000 randomly selected users. Facebook altered their news feeds to show more positive or negative posts. The purpose of this study was to show how emotions could spread on social media. The results were published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, kicking off a firestorm of backlash over whether the study was unethical. Let me come right out and tell you that it's not. Directly altering the mood of your users is not something that is ethical. I can understand why some people might have concerns about it, and my co-authors and I are very sorry for the way the paper described the research and any anxiety caused about it, he wrote, according to the New York Times. Great, I'm glad you're sorry. Now change your behavior. Oh, and here's the big one. Entire documentaries were written about this very scandal.
We targeted those whose minds we thought we could change until they saw the world the way we wanted them to.
There is a possibility that the American public had been experimented on.
In 2016, Facebook and Cambridge Analytica were involved in a major scandal that highlighted the misuse of personal data. Cambridge Analytica, a political consulting firm, accessed the personal data of millions of Facebook users without their consent. This data was used to target and influence political advertising during the US presidential election, as well as other political campaigns. The breach occurred when a researcher named Alexander Kogan developed a personality quiz app that collected data not only from users who took the quiz, but also from their Facebook friends. This allowed Cambridge Analytica to gather data on around 87 million people. The firm used this data to build a detailed psychological profile and create targeted political ads to sway voter behavior. Mark Zuckerberg was at the helm the entire time, and it eventually came out in March 2018 that Facebook knew about this and did nothing the entire time. The world finally got the answer to the question, where's Zuck, on Wednesday when Facebook CEO and co-founder broke his silence on the data harvesting allegations. In a statement posted on his Facebook wall, Zuckerberg avoided the word sorry, but did express partial blame for Facebook's role in not doing enough to protect user privacy. Look at how all of this has been completely walked back now. 2018, we didn't do enough to protect user privacy. 2025, we are rolling back our content moderation policies. Facebook's plan for handling controversy goes something like this. First, they downplay. Initially, Facebook denies the severity of issues or downplays its impact. 2, they take their time in addressing the problem, often waiting until public pressure is too high or waiting until criticism disappears entirely. Number 3, they apologize minimally and issue a statement admitting partial fault or evading responsibility entirely. Number 4, and this one is my favorite, they promise action. They enact changes that sound good but don't actually address the root cause of the problem.
We considered it a closed case. In retrospect, that was clearly a mistake. We shouldn't have taken their word for it, and we've updated our policies and how we're going to operate the company to make sure that we don't make that mistake again.
Number 5, they do nothing. Ultimately, they do very little to actually fix the root of the issue, or they simply implement cosmetic changes to appease the public opinion without making any real impact.
Only 3 things to remember in a crisis. 1, acknowledge the issue. So far, Facebook refuses to acknowledge the issue. 2, the top guy or gal has to take responsibility. It appears that both Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg have retreated to the caves of Kandahar, as Sheryl Sandberg is writing a book entitled Lean Out, Leadership and How to Avoid It When It Matters Most. And finally, 3, overcorrect. The role model here is Tylenol that cleared the shelves of every bottle of Tylenol, regardless of the cost of shareholder value. Thus far, Facebook has refused to do anything that might endanger earnings or shareholder value.
Mark Zuckerberg's testimony before Congress was infamous for his evasive responses and outright lies about Facebook's handling of privacy issues. During the Cambridge Analytica scandal, Mark was grilled about how the company let third-party apps harvest data without proper oversight. He kept claiming that Facebook had taken action, but his answers were vague, misleading, and showed a severe lack of accountability. Congress repeatedly asked if Facebook tracked people even if they didn't have accounts, and Mark Zuckerberg dodged only to later admit that they did. A comment from Joe Rogan's interview with Mark described it perfectly. So magical how when he testified before Congress, every time he was asked the question, he could, quote, just not recall. But now he's on a podcast and he remembers everything like it was yesterday. This is a classic example of how Zuckerberg downplays the severity of the issues with Facebook's data mishandling while offering half-baked solutions. His performance was a PR disaster that reinforced the public's growing distrust in Facebook's commitment to privacy. The phone is 1000% listening. I don't know how many times I get recommended or advertised something that I never looked for but simply spoke about. Facebook recommends people as friends to me that I see every day as customers, but I have zero connection to otherwise. So why and how the does Facebook know I'm talking to these random people? It knows we interact every day somehow. The other day, me and my boyfriend were talking about how his work was getting rid of a load of desk chairs. We'd never searched desk chairs. I went on Facebook after our chat and I had an ad for desk chairs. They're 100% listening. Efforts to rein in Facebook have failed on numerous different attempts due to Mark Zuckerberg's aggressive lobbying and influence over regulators. Facebook ramped up its lobbying spending to record levels, shelling out nearly $20 million in 2022 alone, more than any other big tech firm, and has bankrolled proxy groups to fight against unwelcome regulations. For example, an advocacy group backed by Facebook received an anonymous $34 million donation while campaigning against proposed antitrust reforms that threaten big tech monopolies. Zuckerberg himself has intervened to quash or delay legislation. After publicly apologizing for harms to children at a Senate hearing, he and Facebook lobbied hard against the bipartisan Kids Online Safety Act in 2024, contributing to the bill's ultimate defeat. How terrible is it to advocate against children's safety online? Facebook's Political Action Committee also targeted key lawmakers with donations. In 2023 and 2024, the company poured thousands of dollars into the campaigns of House leaders like Speaker Mike Johnson, who later helped block the kids' safety bill from advancing. These people are truly evil. When faced with legal challenges, Facebook has typically managed to negotiate outcomes that barely dent its bottom line. The company has paid numerous fines, a $5 billion FTC settlement in 2019, European privacy penalties of 390 million euros and 1.2 billion euros in 2023, and a record 1.4 billion biometric data settlement in 2024. But these figures, while large on paper, represent only a small, tiny, microscopic fraction of Facebook's revenue, and in practice have only prompted very, very minor changes. If parking is $500 and a parking ticket is $25, you are going to park illegally. These privacy violations could go on for an eternity. I feel like it's very well within the public domain now that once you sign up for a service, you've just completely lost your right to privacy online. Well, what the f*** is Mark doing now?
Zuckassance.
No, what is
You haven't heard that?
No.
It's Zuck's Renaissance.
Huh. What is this?
Moving up to modern day, Mark has gone through a significantly suspicious rebrand alongside his company, Facebook, to Meta. Do we really think it's a coincidence that he's going through a rebrand at the exact same time his company is? Mark is a really smart guy, and I believe most of his decisions are plays and calculated moves that are designed to reinforce shareholder value. Mark transitioned from a pale white robot nerd to a testosterone-infused broccoli bro. He is such a weird guy. It's like he's pretending to be relatable and not who he actually is. He is an awkward and weird software engineer. I work in the field. I know the type. Oversized tee, gold chain, broccoli haircut. Dude is speed running through fads. Here is the before Mark. In 2011, Zuckerberg set a personal challenge to eat only meat from animals he personally killed. This led him to learn about slaughtering goats, pigs, and chickens, aiming to understand and respect the process of food consumption. Cool, I guess. Zuckerberg was also really known about his enthusiasm and strong desire to smoke meats for whatever reason.
Where I am smoking a brisket. It's smoking. So I'm the meat chef. Yeah, someone asked me, do I smoke meat? Smoking meat. Smoking these meats. Smoking meats earlier in the day. Smoking these meats. Just set the charcoal up and you set the wood chips up, and then smoking meats, grilling meats, good smoky flavor. Smoke a brisket for like 12 hours. You smoke lemon chicken, smoke salmon, you'll love it. Bison sirloin, ribs and sausage, so I'm looking forward to that.
Bro is literally an alien robot hiding in plain sight.
Mark, are the allegations true that you are secretly a lizard? I'm gonna have to go with no on that.
I'll also never forget during one of Mark's calls about the metaverse, he just had a big bottle of Sweet Baby Ray's sitting up on his shelf for whatever reason. He developed an interest in spearfishing and also sunscreen gate. That was so weird. Mark is the kind of guy who would get bit by a zombie and walk into a heavily populated area and not tell anyone he got bit. That would perfectly explain Mark Zuckerberg. And here's the all-new 2025 Mark Zuckerberg.
What is this?
When Jesse Eisenberg played Mark Zuckerberg in the Oscar-nominated 2010 film The Social Network, he nailed the Facebook's founder's early signature look, slight build, nondescript haircut, and gray Gap hoodie. But now, Ben Mesrick, whose book The Accidental Billionaires inspired the movie, told the Post, if we're going to do a sequel to The Social Network, Jesse will have to hit the gym. Over this past year, Zuckerberg 40 has undergone a transformation that the New York Times and Vanity Fair has termed his MAGA makeover. Bro hit the change teams button so fast. Next thing you know, Mark is appearing on Joe Rogan. Rogan serves up Zuckerberg a series of softballs, setting his own tone by referring to content moderation as censorship. The idea that the government was forcing Zuckerberg to censor news about COVID and COVID vaccines, Hunter Biden's laptop, and the election is something of a running theme throughout the interview. When Zuckerberg isn't outright lying about any of this, he's quite vague. But in case you were wondering, a man who was rebuked by the city of San Francisco for putting his name on a hospital while his platform spreads health information thinks, on balance, the vaccines are more positive than negative. Woo! Zuckerberg went further in describing the fact-checking program he'd implemented. It's something out of 1984. He says that the fact-checkers were, quote, too biased, though he doesn't say exactly how. The problem wasn't that fact-checking was bad. It was that conservatives are more likely to share misinformation and get fact-checked, as some research has shown. That means conservatives are also more likely to be moderated. In this sense, perhaps it wasn't Facebook's fact-checking system that had a liberal bias, but reality. I don't know. I did think it was pretty funny. after all these complaints about government censorship, Zuckerberg didn't say a word about Trump and the Republicans' efforts at all. After all, Trump, the incoming president, who has on occasion threatened to put Zuckerberg in prison, was recently asked if Facebook's changes were in response to his threats. Probably, Trump said. That meme that's going around hit the nail on the head. The guy who made a website to rank whether his female classmates were hot or not believes that Facebook needs more masculine energy. He's always been a douche. I agree with everyone who's saying we need to divest our attention away from Meta properties. Mark hopped into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to aid in his rebrand.
And you know what? We're also lucky that you got into Jiu-Jitsu. Because I think that had an effect on you. You look different. When you walked in here today, you look thicker. You look like a different guy. You do. You look like a jiu-jitsu guy now. It's funny. I saw your neck. I'm like, his neck's bigger.
I'll be honest, Mark does look a lot better, but this all just feels so disingenuous, calculated, planned, I don't know, fake, whatever you want to call it. At the same time, he adds Dana White to the board of directors at Facebook. Like, why? I don't really Well, wait a minute. I guess UFC is people fighting in real life, and Facebook is people fighting online. Huh. Maybe it does make sense. Zuckerberg shifted his signature gray t-shirts and hoodies to a more vibrant wardrobe, including floral shirts, slogan t-shirts, and accessories like gold chains. To round it all out, he's wearing a $900,000 watch. Nothing says relatable quite like a $900,000 watch does. This makeover aimed to present a more relatable and humanized image. We've all known you are an alien robot for years, Mark. You are not fooling me now.
I'm gonna have to go with no on that.
To be honest, I think this rebrand weirdly worked. Mark Zuckerberg has been a lot more likable in recent years, and in 2010 to 2020, he could almost not escape the public controversy. Now, I'd say largely he's been out of the public eye, and that has been significantly beneficial for his shareholders at Meta. But along comes Tuesday. On Tuesday, Zuckerberg announced that his company plans to fire its US fact checkers and weaken its ability to moderate disinformation on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. This new policy is meant to curry favor with the coming Trump administration. It's also a desperate attempt to boost engagement across all of Facebook's social networks. Studies show that false social media posts spread up to 20 times faster than true ones, especially if the post features radical, outrageous content such as government conspiracy theories, racist grievances, and calls to violence. That's 2,000 times more engagement and 2,000 times the ad revenue. And the more, quote, novel a post is, often the more detached from reality, the better. Revelations from whistleblowers and internal documents have shown and illustrate Zuckerberg's focus on growth over privacy and user safety. In 2018, Facebook's own researchers warned that the platform's algorithms were intensifying polarization and extremism, exploiting the human brain's attraction to divisiveness, and proposed changes to curb these harms. Those proposals were largely dropped because they reduced the risk of user engagement. Zuckerberg himself has shown disinterest in reforms that promote social good, because they might hurt usage metrics, and he has instructed employees to not bring him similar suggestions again. According to whistleblower Frances Hagen, Zuckerberg was repeatedly presented with the options that would significantly reduce the spread of misinformation and hate on Facebook, yet he chose to favor company-defined metrics like meaningful social interactions, tweaks that kept people clicking and sharing, over more drastic changes that would have cut down on harmful content. Internal briefing notes show that in at least one case, Zuckerberg vetoed adjustments that would have curbed viral misinformation, opting instead for measures that preserved Facebook's addictive appeal. The removal of content moderation is going to catapult this issue into the fourth dimension.
The fact-checking piece was intended to sort of close a little bit of a loophole that existed with news content, where if, false or inflammatory stories about, say, an ethnic minority in a country going through political strife were going viral again and again and again, they could feed into real political violence and have.
If you want to know why Mark is doing something, you can almost just always follow the money. Free speech, Mark does not care about free speech. At least on his platforms, he doesn't. He cares about money. Also, free speech does not exist on social media platforms. These are private companies, private industries, private organizations, private platforms. An argument can be made when the government starts pressuring social media companies to remove certain content, but as John Oliver says in this next video, they are very well within their rights to do do that. Zuckerberg was once a supporter of a handful of progressive causes. He had co-founded an immigration reform group that fought against mass deportations and repeatedly met with Barack Obama during his presidency. But he began to drop hints last summer that he was preparing to politically lean in on supporting Donald Trump. The first came in July when Zuckerberg said that Trump raising his fist after an assassination attempt was, quote, one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my entire life. I will give him that. I will cede that. Donald Trump in that one image of him in front of the American flag pumping his fist was truly iconic. Zuckerberg at the time tempered the praise, saying he would not endorse a political candidate. Look, I don't care who you support for president. I don't care about your politics. This is not a political channel. What I do care about is holding tech CEOs and big tech accountable for the very real harms that they have caused society. All of the profits go to the corporation, all of the benefits go to shareholders, and all of the costs and negative externalities go on society. The only thing I ask for in big tech reform is for the negative externalities and costs to not be on society, but to be on the corporation themselves, so they take responsibility to handle the deep-rooted issues that they are causing in our entire world. As soon as Mark realizes it's in the best interest of shareholders for him to endorse a new political candidate, he takes his ideals and throws them completely out the window. Mark does whatever is popular in the moment, all while wielding a platform with more power than most countries. After Trump won, Trump threatened to throw Mark Zuckerberg in jail. And directly after that, Mark donates $1 million to Trump's inaugural fund. Yeah, sure, I'll probably be pretty nice to you too if you're starting to threaten to throw me in jail for no reason. What happened to Mark Zuckerberg? He got the Gen Z update installed. Poor guy. Broccoli's got him. Weird midlife crisis? ? I'm interested to see where this goes. Considering how awkward and unnatural he seems under normal circumstances, this might be fascinating. The massive success of Facebook eventually led to catastrophe. The business model depends on advertising, which in turn depends on manipulating the attention of users so they see more ads. One of the best ways to manipulate attention is to appeal to outrage and fear, emotions that increase engagement. Facebook's algorithm gives users what they want, so each person's news feed becomes a unique reality. This is a huge problem. Everybody's truth is different now. We don't operate with the same set of facts. A filter bubble that creates the illusion that most people the user knows believes the same thing. Showing users only posts they agree with was good for Facebook's bottom line, but some research showed that it also increased polarization and, as we learned, harmed democracy. What Mark is doing is not secret and is very obvious. He is making changes to avoid the new federal government from decimating his company or him personally. I'm not surprised. I used to be on Facebook a lot. Now I only spend 10 minutes. I do use Facebook Messenger to connect with a few people. That's about it. Too many ads now. And with fact checking going away, there's really no point. Recent years have brought new controversies that show that Mark Zuckerberg's harmful practices are far from resolved. In late 2023, a bipartisan coalition of 42 U.S. state attorney generals sued Facebook, alleging that Facebook and Instagram were deliberately designed with addictive features that hook children and teenagers, contributing to a youth mental health crisis. The lawsuit accuses Facebook of knowingly exploiting young users, comparing its tactics to those of big tobacco, and claims the company, quote, lied to the public about the dangers its products pose to kids. Quote, we have refused to allow Facebook to trample on our children's mental and physical health, all to increase profits, declared California's Attorney General in launching the case, underscoring the perception that Mark Zuckerberg's company continues to put earnings over children's welfare. Meanwhile, Facebook's conflicts with regulators have escalated globally. In 2023, when Canada passed an online news law requiring platforms to pay publishers, Facebook's response was to block all news content for Canadian users, a hardball move to avoid sharing even a sliver of its revenue. This blackout had dire side effects. During Canada's unprecedented wildfires, residents found that they couldn't share critical evacuation updates or safety information on Facebook due to the news ban. Canadian officials blasted Facebook for this move as completely reckless. Justin Trudeau accused Facebook of putting corporate profits over public safety, and of course they do. Only after intense criticism did Facebook belatedly introduce exceptions for emergency information, but the episode reinforced the view that Mark Zuckerberg will threaten public interest and even public safety to preserve Facebook's profits. Even new Facebook products have raised alarms. The company explored launching a version of Facebook that would be given to those under the age of 13. Only after a significant public outcry did they walk back this decision. From Europe to Asia, countries struggle with Mark Zuckerberg's outsized influence with the platform. And time again, the playbook with Mark Zuckerberg, public apologies, minor adjustments, heavy lobbying, and even legal imitation has helped them avert fundamental accountability. Mark Zuckerberg is laser focused on shareholder value and growth at all costs. Many of these scandals point to the central tension in Facebook's operations, maximizing user engagement and thus revenue from advertisers while ignoring harm to society. And Zuckerberg's insistence on prioritizing the company's bottom line and his belief that the free market should drive the platform's direction has always led to significant negative outcomes for users. In many ways, Zuckerberg's actions, from enabling harmful algorithms to resisting stronger regulations, illustrate a broader pattern of profit-driven decision-making. This vision comes at a cost to those most vulnerable, like teens, for instance, and has contributed to a sense that while Zuckerberg, an innovative entrepreneur, simply does not give one single about society. Whew. Okay, are you still with me? Dylan, what are we supposed to do about it? Well, great question, me. Direct quote from a mentor of Mark Zuckerberg. I am really sad about Facebook. I got involved with the company more than a decade ago and have taken great pride and joy in the company's success until the past few months. Now I am disappointed. I am embarrassed. I am ashamed. With more than 1.7 billion members, Facebook is among the most influential businesses in the world. Whether they like it or not, whether Facebook is a technology company or a media company, the company has a huge impact on politics and social welfare. Every decision that management makes can matter to the lives of real people. Management is responsible for every action, just as they get credit for every success. They need to be held accountable for failures. Recently, Facebook has done some things that are truly horrible, and I no longer can excuse this behavior. We need to reform big tech and Facebook in these key areas. Democracy depends on shared facts and values. It depends on deliberation and the rule of law. It depends on having a free press and other countervailing forces to hold those powerful accountable. That's the whole point of this channel. That's the ethos behind why I decided to get into tech commentary and start talking about how I work in software, and all of my software engineer peers' suggestion on how to use technology is, quote, don't use that shit. They have kids and they don't let their children have iPads or social media accounts. I think it's very telling for engineers, software engineers who work in the industry. Their best advice is to tell people to simply not use it at all. Facebook remains a threat to the powerless around the world. The company's free basic service has brought internet service to poor people in roughly 60 countries, but at the cost of a massive social disruption. The lack of language skills and cultural insensitivity has blinded Facebook to the ways in which its platform can be used to harm defenseless minorities. This has already played out with deadly outcomes in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Facebook remains a threat to privacy. The company's commitment to surveillance would make an intelligence agency proud, but not so its handling of data. There need to be versions of Facebook newsfeed and all search results that are free of manipulation. Users should always own all their own data and metadata, and they should be compensated much better for it. I don't think we stop there. We need to remove Section 230 protection for social media companies, and we also need to age gate social media. You can't drive a car until you're 16. You shouldn't be able to get on social media either. Big tech needs to be regulated and broken up. There are essentially 5 main companies that dominate every single industry in America, and technology is no different. Big tech is no different, and they have way too much power. Mark Zuckerberg will only ever act in the interest of shareholders and their best interests. It's literally his job to make the stock go from $600 to $601. If teens are cutting themselves and men are killing themselves at rates never seen before, that's not his problem. Mark reminds me of Elon Musk. Awkward, weird, and obsessed with money. Oh, I made a video about him too. Click the video on screen now to check out everything wrong with Elon Musk. See you in the next one.